Welcoming a baby is one of life's greatest gifts. Here at Stoka, we make the second greatest gift so every parent can enjoy their first. Curate a one-of-a-kind baby registry with award-winning products such as the Trip Trap high chair, the unique Sleepy Oval mini crib, and iconic Explory stroller. Our products are designed to grow alongside your family and can be used from birth, but also transform as your child grows and develops. Stoka products are not only beautiful, but also are built with safety and sustainability at the forefront, providing parents a peace of mind and support for their greatest gift, their baby. To learn more, visit Stoka.com. You can use promo code REGISTERWITHSTOKA at checkout for a free cushion with any high chair purchase. That's STOKKE.com, promo code REGISTERWITHSTOKA. Here we grow.
So, how does it feel when you play Roll Up to Win with Tim Hortons? Buy a hot or cold beverage using the Tim's app and find out. Roll in the app for a chance to win prizes ranging from free coffee and donuts to a Universal Orlando resort vacation or a sweet car. Oh, don't forget the TV. And this year, every roll is a shot at a $1,000 daily giveaway drawing for two $500 prizes. Roll up to win and get treated by Tim's. No purchase necessary. Account registration required. 50 U.S. and D.C. 18 plus entered by 4/2/23. See rules at rolluptowin.com for free entry and full details. Void in Florida and where prohibited.
Welcome to the Behind the Bits podcast. Your host, Scott Curtis, wants to learn everything he can about stand-up comedy and take you along for the ride. Scott and his guests talk serious about comedy in every episode. Behind the Bits will uncover knowledge from different perspectives on subjects such as writing and performing stand-up comedy, as well as booking shows and the comedy life. If you're thinking about becoming a stand-up comic, already in the comic game, or a comedy nerd, Behind the Bits is the show for you. Now, let's get Behind the Bits.
Hey, BTB buddies, I'm going to give a longer intro than usual for Matt Alano-Martin. Two reasons. One, his special Tango in Philly, which is free to watch on YouTube, is a must-watch for any aspiring comedian. Not just because it's funny, but because it's a great way to learn how the late show on a Friday goes. You see, Matt was taping the special for Helium Comedy Clubs, and everybody in the audience knew that this was the case. It's a special. The problem is that a very drunk woman in the front row kept interrupting him. Then a drunk guy in the front row started to try to be part of the show. And finally, a drunk guy in the back yelled out during Matt's closer, which is about him reconciling with his dad before he died from ALS. Matt's dad, not Matt. Matt handled this with grace and humor, which made a great set, but not what you'd expect from a comedy special. Then he had the balls to put it out with all the interruptions. I rewatched it before writing this, and I think this video should be shown to all comedians who are about to get that host or feature spot, because this will happen to you, guaranteed. If you're prepared like Matt was, though, through 10 years of experience, you'll be able to handle it much better. Give this one a watch. Reason number two, Matt has a new podcast he's doing with Dwight Simmons, who was a guest right here on Behind the Bits in episode 46. It's called Matt and Dwight Just Might. And it's all about being a working full-time comedian based in the Midwest. One of the things I always tell folks is I started Behind the Bits because I couldn't find any podcasts that really broke down what it takes to be a comedian. Well, Matt and Dwight Just Might is a podcast I was looking for. I drove 6 hours today to Ashland, Alabama. 1 star, do not recommend. But I did get to binge the first 5 episodes of Matt and Dwight Just Might. Here's the deal. I get to talk philosophically about stand-up with my guests, but I don't get to talk as much comedy 101 or even 201 as I'd like, because I'm feeling my way through an interview with somebody I don't know. Matt and Dwight know each other, and they get right into the nuts and bolts of stand-up. They went into how to write and email a booker to ask to be scheduled on a show and how to tape a set in the first couple episodes. They also talk about stuff that went well and stuff that didn't go so well for them in the previous week. Because as a comedian, sometimes you have a good night and sometimes you have a bad night. Oh, another cool thing is the stuff they talk about is questions posed by their podcast listeners. Maybe I should do that. Anyway, please give Matt's special a watch and subscribe to Matt and Dwight Just Might, and you'll learn some stuff, okay? Thanks to Jason Staples for the hookup on this one. It's a really good one. Matt Alano-Martin hails from Bloomington, Indiana, and has performed all over the world. He's a co-founder of the Limestone Comedy Festival held in Bloomington, and his special Tango in Philly came out just this week. Let's bring him out right now. It is Matt Alano-Martin. Hi, Matt.
Hello. Hi, Scott. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I like the ad read because I also sometimes have a trouble falling back to sleep.
All right. Yeah.
It's like this is already paying off for me.
All right,
like
great. Yeah, just use a code behind 20 so they keep me on for more than 2 weeks.
Yeah, will do.
The problem with podcast advertising is they are not very patient. They expect everything to happen right away. And on little independent podcasts like this, it takes a while. And you know, it takes weeks, months instead of just, they always bring you on for a trial run of 2 weeks. And yeah, but that's okay. You know, whatever. I did Manscaped a while back and they sent me a box that weighed like 20 pounds, like everything they sell. So they've got the ball shaver, they've got the nose hair trimmer, they've got all these products that I haven't even opened because one of them's called a ball toner, and I just can't imagine needing to tone my balls. And I've actually tried to do a joke about that, but you know how that goes. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah, I feel like that should be a special Patreon only episode.
Yeah, there you go. But I'm stoked to have you on the show. You know, we know people in kind because you just started a podcast with Dwight Simmons, and he was a guest probably, I don't know, 2 years ago or so, and loved Dwight. Saw him here in Huntsville about a year ago, and yeah, he's one of my favorites.
Yeah, Dwight's an amazing person, and one of my best friends in comedy. And I mean, we just known each other forever, and we would do these tours together, and it just seemed like a natural fit for sure. I do want to also give a shout out to Jason Staples. I love Jason so much, and I see he's in the chat, I think.
Oh, is he? Cool.
Here in the software, yeah. But I also a big fan of Jason, and it's been a while since I've seen him, so hopefully I'll get to see him again soon.
Yeah, Jason is one of the first comedians that I started talking to when I started doing open mics up in South Bend. And him and Mike Hullinger and I are really into horror movies. And we got together and talked about horror movies and just had a good time. We had a podcast called Weird Awesome, and I think I went on and talked about one of the Carpenter films. It had Donald Pleasance in it, but it wasn't Halloween.
It's not Cat People, is it? That has Donald Pleasance in it?
Jason's going to know it. It's one of my favorite movies, and I can't think of it. Anyway, but yeah, he's a cool guy, and fortunately, we've kept in touch even after moving. But let's talk about you, Matt. So the first thing I watched was a special, and I have to say some stuff happened in that special that I don't think you were expecting. I'm sure the audience knew that you were taping a special. They normally announce that ahead of time, but there was a couple folks drinking a little bit too much.
Yeah, it was really interesting. And it was crazy. So the way that they shot these specials, I was one of many people who got a special through Helium Comedy Studios. They basically shot them for several weeks in a row. And they're all shot at the Philadelphia Helium, the home club, the original club for the Helium chain. And I think their original idea was that they wanted to just kind of capture a club feel. And boy, did they capture it on mine. And so they weren't really treating it like a special so much as it's a live show and we're going to tape it.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because, like my buddy Ramin Masafani taped the same weekend as me, and I was in the room during his taping. And then there was a different drunk woman in the back of the room who yelled out during one of his bits. And so to their credit, I will say we were like the second group that they had done. And by the second night of our tapings, they corrected everything. Like they were screening more who was getting seated up front. They were like, They were treating it more like, oh, we have all these cameras and we're spending all this money on this. They were just doing it like it's a Friday late show, and it certainly was a Friday late show that we captured with mine.
Yeah. And you know what? I thought it was pretty cool the way it worked out. I mean, the young lady up front was probably even drunker than she was portrayed, because there was a couple times, because I got to the point where I was just watching and there was a little bit more slumping every time the camera got to her. So she must have started out in the bag and just really fed it more as she was sitting there.
Yeah, it's one of these things where, I mean, and I do like legitimately ask her if she's okay
Yeah.
at one point because she's so drunk.
Yeah.
And it's one of these things where, yeah, what's crazy is like that was 10 minutes into the show. Like there was an MC that did like 10 minutes and then I came out and what you see is like basically we talked about that. We did a first edit of it. Jimmy Chairman, the producer and director of these specials, who's really great. He sent a first draft and he and his editor had tried to edit around this drunk woman and the interruptions, constantly talking through the whole show. And she's like, but it didn't work because the vibe was off in the room still. You could still see like shots of other people in the audience pissed off and you didn't know why, because we had taken out the fact that this woman was just being irritating. And so they did a second edit and it really just makes the narrative very clear what was going on. And I thought it was just brilliant the way they did it. And I'm not trying to, this has nothing to do with my jokes and what I did on stage, just their editing and the way they framed the narrative.
Yeah.
With this edit that got released on Saturday, I was just blown away that they made it crystal clear what's going on. We could have like made it much worse. There is actually footage of her that's even worse than that, that we felt was like maybe a little too embarrassing to include in it.
Yeah.
And so we try to walk the line of not, the same way that I handled her. I didn't try to dunk on her and didn't call her any names, but I was also like, well, this is kind of a big deal. This is recording the special.
Yeah, I know.
I came here with some jokes to do and I can't even get like, I didn't realize this until the other day, but there's 2 jokes that I start and then I just don't finish them because I have to deal with her.
Yeah.
And those jokes are just not in the special now.
Do they have to sign any sort of a waiver or anything when you do something like they're going to be part of the special?
I don't think they actually had everyone sign, but there was signage everywhere and it was in the ticket buying information.
Okay.
And so it was explicitly clear that we were taping a special. I mean, there's literally a cameraman on stage with us.
Yeah.
Like the Philly Helium stage is not very deep, but it's kind of wide.
Yeah.
There was just a camera guy up there all the time for all the tapings. So it was very clear what was going on. And also the MC talked about the taping. But yeah, she showed up so in the bag. And she wasn't even the only one. There's like another guy that kind of starts piping up later on in the front row.
Yeah. Matt?
But yeah.
The other Matt?
Yes. Yeah, the other Matt, yes. But we just decided to just make it less of a comedy special, more of a document of like, this is the Friday Late Show.
Yeah.
This is what happens. This is how I handled it. I'm sure there's people that could have handled it better than I did, but I feel like I did okay.
Yeah, you did great. And what I loved was the foreshadowing because, they have you talking a little bit up front and then they do the announcement of no talking or whatever during the show. And then they pan on that girl and she's like, is this a joke?
Yeah. That's what she legitimately said to a stranger sitting next to her.
Yeah.
That's the other thing is that couple that's sitting to her left, they're the ones who, and when we tried to edit it around, that like it looked like they hated the show because they were getting so irritated with her.
Right. Yeah.
Because she keeps talking to them.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's different. And I don't know, I've gotten some very nice notes and people, like I have some friends that, are academics and scholarly type writers who have sent me messages like, it's so fascinating. It's all about the performer and audience dynamic. And it's just like this. And I was like, well, cool. I mean, hopefully you also thought it was funny.
Yeah.
Also, I'm glad you thought it was compelling, but also hopefully you laughed,
Yeah. It was definitely funny. And, you made reference to it, right? It was a little bit past the middle. I think this isn't the show I was expecting, but we're rolling with it. And I like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think we kind of realized at the moment that we captured something, but it was also tricky in how we were going to present it without really being, because I'm not a mean person. And one of the main things that I talked about with them is like, I know that a clip that says something like, comedian destroys drunk, woman or drunk B word or whatever would get 1 million hits on social media. I was like, we're not doing that. We're not. Like, we can have clips of me doing the crowd work and handling her, but we're not going to frame it like that.
Right.
Because it doesn't like fit who I am as a person. And I just don't think that stuff is cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Although I understand the way the internet works, it would probably get a lot more views if we had done that. But.
Right. And you know what? I've been that person. So I know what it's like on the other side. And golly, it would be rough if that was filmed when I was acting like that.
I mean, I'm 9 years sober, and so there definitely was a sort of, is this the ghost of my own past coming back to haunt me?
You said something at the front end of the special that really stuck with me because it's something I talked to with a lot of comedians who have been doing it double-digit years, and you said that you are getting closer to your truth as a comedian. How do you define getting closer to your truth?
It's hard to put into words, just more of a feeling, and it's more things coming in. Just they feel more natural, they feel more pure. I mean, you still put in the work and you have to rewrite and things like that. It's not like everything that comes out is just perfectly done and ready to go. I think it's just keying in more and more on what my sensibilities as a comedian is, what I think is funny, how I can present that. Because, we all for a long time, we will write, well, this joke is not really my style, but it's a great joke. I figured out how to write a joke that maybe is very dark or, is like more of like a dirty one-liner type joke or whatever, And so I feel like I'm moving through all of that and it's still incorporating some of that stuff into the set. I'm now working on hour 4 and it's a hard thing to describe. I think it's just getting closer to my emotional truth, like the way that I'm presenting my humor. It's less about, oh, isn't this clever wordplay? Oh, I did this turnaround. I know how to like manipulate an audience's expectations so then I can get a big laugh on the punchline. It's like, no, this is like either stuff that's more personal or even if it's more superficial, there is an emotional intelligence to it that I think is becoming more and more wide and more not singular to me because that makes it sound like there's lots of comics who do this, but just my personal emotional intelligence, the way that I think about things, I think it's getting that stuff's coming up more to the surface in the material without being explicit because I don't want to make it sound super high ended. I mean, one of my new jokes is a blowjob joke,
Right.
but at the end of the day, what it's really about is about male, and so that's like the subtext to jokes are getting more and more true to like the things that I want to talk about. I think that's what I'm going for. Who knows? I don't.
Right, right.
It changes every day, man.
And, I listened to a couple of your previous albums and it doesn't feel like you have like become a completely different comedian, but I do, even from the special, the jokes that you got to say, I did feel like it was more, not it, because the jokes on the albums are personal too, but it's felt like it was, for lack of a better word, heartfelt. It felt a little bit more like you were more emotionally invested in the words you were saying.
Yeah, I think that's a performance aspect, honestly, which is something that I've been able to key into the last couple of years. Is I'm really proud of my second record, Bloodmouth. I like a lot of the jokes on there. I think they still hold up, but they still are presented as jokes. Like here is now this joke. Here is now this joke. And I think what I started to get into with Midnight Nachos, which is overlaps the same material as the special Tango and Philly, but that's the third record that came out in July, is it's more of a conversation, more of like, yes, there are jokes in there, but it's less like, here is a joke, here is the setup, here is the punchline. It's more of a continual conversation. And then there's punchlines in there and funny parts. And that to me is what's the most interesting part of stand up and why I like it so much is I like the conversational aspect with an audience, which seems like a weird thing to say when I had to spend a bunch of time shutting down a drunk lady in my special. But I mean, I don't mean like an actual literal conversation. I mean like like an exchange of energy and like getting everybody on that same wavelength and vibe.
Yeah.
That's what I'm shooting for and what I'm going for now, as opposed to here's a well-written joke and here's the punchline and hopefully you laugh at it. It's
Right.
more about now, like, do you get on my wavelength, basically, is what I'm shooting for.
And, I'm going through the same thing myself and it's more, and I hate talking about myself, but it's more of a extreme change because when I started out, and I didn't start until I was 52, but when I started out, I did what I thought people would want to hear out of me, which is clean and just really vanilla. And that's not the type of person I am. And I feel like I went from writing what I think is funny to writing what I think and making it funny.
That's the key right there. You just nailed it, is this idea of, yeah, stop writing what you think people want to hear. Particularly, I mean, it's a dangerous thing when you write down to a certain room, whether that be like, a hillbilly rural room or an insider hipster room. Writing jokes to a specific room, it's not great. I know a joke is great when it works most of the time, most of the places. And I play everything from like redneck VFW hall type shows and little towny bars to opening for super alty people, like Marie Bamford and people like that. And so when that joke works in all those places, like, oh, this joke is good or this story is good. It is interesting. I'm wondering, because I didn't start till I was 35, but when you started at 52, did you think that you thought that you had to work clean because of your age?
Partially age, partially the way I look. I look like a high school gym teacher. I had hair at the time when I first started, but
comedy will do that to you. It'll make you lose your hair.
Yes.
Comedy will make it all fall out.
Yeah, it was a COVID thing. I had a bald spot anyway, and I couldn't get my hair cut. It looked like a comb over, so I just went to the bathroom and it was gone.
Yes.
I'm very impulsive like that. So.
But you thought that you appeared to be clean cut, and so you felt like you had to work clean.
Yeah. And, I was reading all the comedy books and listening to all the podcasts, and, all of them say you got to work clean. You got to stay away from material that could offend people, all that kind of stuff. And when it comes right down to it, I'm an angry boomer. I'm mad at my generation. I'm mad at how we have ruined the country for our children and our grandchildren, and we won't even answer for it. I've got a lot more anger behind me, and that's what I'm writing now. Now I am bombing the fuck out of open mics by making this switch, because it's like starting over.
Yeah. Yeah, because if you're radically changing your style, it is like a big changeover. But like Pryor did that, Carlin did that. There are a lot of the greats who were pretty successful doing one thing, and then they just chucked it all and decided to reinvent themselves as far as what they talked about on stage.
Right.
So I think that's great, and I think that's an interesting angle too, of like the angry boomer, but you're not dunking on young people. You're like, no, our generation is the one who messed everything up. You're taking this millennial viewpoint, Yeah. So so did you say that you started comedy in COVID, or just the haircut was in COVID?
The haircut was COVID.
Gotcha, okay.
52, 2018. Yeah, so I started I've been doing it for 6 years.
Okay.
Anyway, because I'm 58 now. So 6 years ago.
You look good for 58. I don't know if it's a filter that you're using or something on this video chat.
It's no filter.
I do want to just also let anybody who is watching the video, every time that you see me go out of frame, I am not doing cocaine. I am blowing my nose. I'm having a crazy allergy attack, and it started right before we started recording. But I just realized I'm going just out of frame and bending over enough that it looks like that might be what I'm doing.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that you're 9 years sober and you've been performing comedy for around 14, 15, right?
Yeah, I'm coming up on 14 years in March.
Okay.
14 years in March, yeah.
So first off, as far as getting sober, did the addiction start before you started doing comedy and just run into it? Or was that something that happened while you were doing comedy?
No, I had a problem before I ever started doing comedy. And then, I think comedy enables a lot of substance abuse issues, because there is a very big social aspect to comedy, particularly when you start hanging out with other comics, you're drinking. It's a job. Once you even work up your way where you're doing it as a job and you're getting paid, you can drink at your job. And then a lot of times it's almost encouraged, There are those crowds that love to send a shot up to the stage. So like, let's get the clown drunk, that kind of stuff. And so my substance abuse issues were already a problem before I started doing comedy. It just kind of hit a head, 9 years, so for 5 years into comedy or so, where I was on the road and I was miserable. So I was just drinking out of control in the hotel room, and then, barely getting it together to perform, and then just rinse and repeat, right? It's like how I was doing it. So I finally just realized that I needed to, what it was is like, I needed to figure out, why am I out here doing this? Why am I away from my wife? Why am I out here on the road doing these shows if it's not to be as good as I can possibly be at this thing? And so basically I just rewired my brain and my priorities. And so it stopped being about being a tortured, misunderstood artist.
Yeah.
Only the bottle understands me, kind of bullshit narrative that you buy into on some level as a drunk. And then it just really became more about, no, if I want to do this for real, then I need to get this out of my life for a lot of reasons, for comedy related reasons, and it's also just to become a better comic. Still be here, because I almost died a couple times too. That was a big big part of it too.
Getting clean while you're still performing comedy, because I mean, you at least were a road dog. I mean, 150 dates a year is a road dog. And being on the road and being by the booze and everything else you can get your hands on very easily at the clubs, did you have any kind of a support system that helped you stay on the right track, or was it just something you decided internally and you just went with it?
No, I did have a support system. I had two people who acted basically as de facto sobriety coaches.
Okay.
The main one was a friend of mine that I had known since they were in college. I live in a college town. I live in Bloomington, Indiana. They had come to college here. They're a few years younger than me, but they dated one of my friends, and I've known them ever since then. But they were a big proponent of AA. They were really into the program, and they were primarily my main one. And then the second one, and they also worked in the comedy industry. They didn't work as a comic, but they worked for a management agency in New York, and they were a lifesaver. The other one was a comic who is also sober and had been sober for a couple of years before me. And so basically, if I needed to reach out and call, they were there for me. And the main person who wasn't a comic but worked in comedy industry and was very into the AA program, it became a running bit where if I called them, like on a weekend, like after 10 or whatever, they would answer their phone and go, "So what comedy festival are you at?"
Yeah.
Because that was particularly a trigger for me as I was getting into these festivals, and then I had like all this like imposter syndrome, and also everybody parties their ass off at festivals, comedians do. And so it was very tricky. And particularly if I had to do like more than just a weekly check-in, if I had to call for extra backup, that was how they would answer the phone.
That's great. And congratulations on being able to do that, because, a lot of folks can't. It's funny. Some of my favorites, had the same realization as you, like Letterman. He finally said, okay, I saw what it did to my dad, so I'm just going to stop. Tom Dreesen, who's one of my all-time favorites, same thing. He saw that it was holding him back. And it's funny, you can bottom out so many times and almost die, but when you've got something that you really want and then you see something that's holding you back, one obsession trumps the other one, and you can actually succeed. And that's great.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think also, just to take it a step farther, and this is not nearly the same thing, but I recently quit caffeine because it was affecting how I was performing on stage. I would get too jittery and I would talk way too fast, and I was getting to even the point where I was stuttering sometimes on stage because I just had so much caffeine in my system. And so I got COVID back in July and was basically laid up on my bed for a week just on ibuprofen anyway. And so I kind of had made it through the caffeine withdrawal migraines that happened like the first week or so. And so I just ran with it. And so I haven't had caffeine since then, with the exception of a couple of weeks ago, I have started putting like 1 scoop of regular coffee when I make a pot of coffee. So I'll have like the tiniest bit of caffeine because I did really feel like just slow and foggy even months later. But also it was like, is it long COVID? Is it caffeine withdrawal still? Is it because I'm getting older? And so I just decided to see if it was the caffeine thing, and it was. And I'm on a tiny baby bit of caffeine now. Like I have a little bit every day, but just a minuscule amount.
So you are right on the edge of moving to Utah and getting a whole bunch of wives.
Nope. No, thank you. My cousin lives in Utah, and because he married into it, basically, not that they're like practicing Mormons like that or anything, but he hates it so much.
Yeah.
He's just like, and so just from talking to him, I was like, yeah, I don't think I would want to live in Utah.
Yeah. Hey, Scott here. I want to take a minute to thank you for listening to Behind the Bits. If you get some info that will help you as a comedian, or if you just learned what being a stand-up comedian is all about, that's why I started Behind the Bits. It's a struggle for an independent podcast to find an audience. So if you like what you hear, there are 3 things you can do to help out. 1, give Behind the Bits a rating and review on your favorite podcast platform. 2, follow us on social media and interact with our post. Just a like does wonders for the algorithm. And the 3rd one is share an episode you like with someone else who might like it too. If you do any or all of these 3 things, the great guest I've had on Behind the Bits will reach more people like you. Thanks again for listening and for your support. No doubt.
Nothing but love to people in Utah, though. If Dry Bar is watching this, I'd love to do one.
Yeah, I think you could pull it off as well as anybody. If Bob Zaney can do it, you can do it.
Yeah, well, and I love that Augie Smith just did one, and he even promoted it by saying, "I'm probably the only comedian to have won like the Dirty Show at JFL and also do a Dry Bar." I think in like the same year.
So starting at 35, I did see a little bit into your history that you were in the music industry for a long time and then shifted to comedy. What was it that made you make that shift?
It was a couple of different factors together. I had played in bands since I was a kid, but then I also worked professionally as a tour manager for bigger, more successful bands for about 7 years. And in the time that I was doing that as a tour manager, a comedy club opened here in Bloomington. And at first it was a funny bone for like the first year while Jared and Dana Thompson, the owners, like basically they did that to learn how do you run a club, right? And so after the 1 year the franchise was up or whatever, they didn't renew it. And then they rebranded as the Comedy Attic. And so it had opened in my town, but I was also gone most of the time anyway on the road. But I was aware that this thing had opened because I actually knew Jared from before they opened the club. And the thing that kind of I was getting, tired of being on, because touring in the music world is a different animal. You're gone for months at a time. Like what we in comedy think is a long tour. Like I just did 12 days out. That's not, most bands don't even call that a tour. That's such a short, run, And so I wanted to be with my wife, even though we weren't married yet at that time. I wanted to come home and propose to her. And so it was partially that. And then also the club opening up. And then the first show I went to at the Comedy Attic was the finals of their amateur contest, of their first year of their summer contest. And the three guys on stage were funny, but they weren't unattainably funny. Like I never watched Carlin and thought I could do that.
Yeah.
Or even like someone like Mark Curry. I've seen Mark Curry perform live, Mr. Cooper, for those of you that remember that show. And there was never a thing that I thought I could do that. Seeing those three guys, it made it attainable. Sorry, I have to blow my nose. So that's the thing that made me then kind of really start obsessing about what I wanted to do. And I still spent like another 6 months trying to get the nerve up to do the open mic and to write that first 5. And once I did it, man, I was like, it's like anybody else. It is like a drug. You get hooked,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't really remember my first set because I basically blacked out while I was on stage. I did it, not from drinking either, just from nerves.
Yeah.
And so I remember immediately afterward being in the green room and basically shaking from adrenaline. And I was like, oh, that's good. I like that.
Yeah.
So that was it. And then it was off to the races basically. And because I was starting so late, I took it pretty seriously. About maybe 6 to 9 months later, open micing and doing regional open mics and stuff, I really kind of want to do this. And then I quit a job that I was about to get fired from. I was working for a music publishing company and it was not music publicist. And it was terrible. I hated it. But when I was losing that job, my wife, Denise, was like, hey, we're pretty good on money right now. You seem really serious about this. Why don't you give it a shot? And like, that's what made me then be able to become a professional, because then I could dedicate all my time to it. And I also had some lucky breaks early on, which helped, but she had not said that, I might not have ever recorded a special that was nearly ruined by a drunk lady in Philadelphia.
No, you've got something good there. I really like that you just kept it up and didn't re-record it. Yeah, I like what came out of that. So the Limestone Comedy Festival it's one of the most respected comedy festivals in the country now. And you and Dwight and I can't remember the other.
Jared Thompson.
Jared. Yeah, I always forget Jared. But it's one of the biggest comedy festivals, especially in the Midwest, but everybody knows about it. I wanted to talk about the logistics of starting a comedy festival from nothing. How did you get that going and how did you make it happen? Let's talk about the first couple years, because now it's almost like, I don't know, words. It's almost like riding a bike, but getting that started, I know, is difficult. What did you do to get that going?
Well, the genesis of the festival, I was starting to get into comedy festivals, and some of them were really great. Well, that ran them were great, but they were run not the most professional, right? We're like well-intentioned people that didn't really know what they were doing, or a very well-organized, well-run festival that basically treated the unfamous comics like crap. Like it would be like, I don't know why I drove 12 hours to come do this thing if I'm going to be treated like dirt, And it was driving back from one of the second ones, that I just basically formulated Limestone. It's basically build the better mousetrap, essentially. And I was like, okay, how can we make a festival that the unfamous comics are treated with as much respect as the headliners. What would the structure be? And so basically I just formulated the entire thing on the drive home. I met with Jared the next day, pause for blowing my nose. And I just laid it all out to him, like the structure, like the 3 days, these are the venues that we'll use. This is how it'll work. And, Jared's big thing at the beginning was that he wanted to go. I was actually picturing it smaller. And so he was like, if we're going to do this, we need to just come out big. And so he's the one who had that vision for it. I thought we would slowly grow to be a bigger festival. And spent a year. Jared and I spent a year before the first festival planning it, building it, working on it. The biggest challenge was getting sponsors. We couldn't get sponsors because it was not a proven thing. Right. And so that first year is always the hardest in that way, in the money wise, but we just really believed it was well done. And we were also lucky because we were right before the boom of comedy festivals. When we did Limestone, like the only, there was JFL, there was San Francisco and Seattle and Boston, right? The ones that had been around forever. But they're certainly in a small market like ours, like Bloomington's a small college town. We're considered a secondary market at best, just population wise. We were right before the boom of we debuted the same year, I think, as Moon Tower. The only thing that was before us was Bridgetown in Portland. And it was it was the hot indie one, right? It was like this upstart independent festival that people loved. And it was like this big deal, right? And a couple of years in, after I was doing Limestone, then there was this explosion and there's like festivals all over the place. So the biggest challenges really were like, the biggest thing was kind of like the venues got it, like they trusted us. Most of the venues that we used were music venues who knew me from my music days. Like we personally knew all the owners, and so there was that element of it. And then because the Comedy Attic at that point had established itself as being like this really well-respected club in the Midwest, we kind of built off of their legacy essentially. Yeah. And as far as like signing big headliners to come do the festival the first year and then also selling tickets basically. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's kind of how we did it. And honestly, structure wise, as far as how we do things, we use a badge system because another big part of it is we didn't want to rip off people who are coming to the festival. Like I'll just throw their name out there because they're a corporate festival, but like Moon Tower, if you want to see all the things at Moon Tower, you're spending thousands of dollars. Like it's crazy expensive. They have badges, but then you also then have to buy tickets for the bigger shows. So we just designed as like, if you buy a badge, if you buy a 3-day badge, you get to go to any of the shows that you want to go to. You pick. No matter if it's Patton Oswalt, doesn't mean if it's the small headliner, it doesn't matter what it is. You pick what show you want to go to in that time spot. And we've stuck with that. We've raised the price once in 10 years. And I think we raised them by $5 or something like that, And so that's another part of the design is treat all the comics equally with respect, show them a great time, and then also treat everybody who comes to the festival with respect too, like not just as a big cash grab.
Right. And the Comedy Attic itself is, you talk about it being a respected comedy club. It's like one of the most respected comedy clubs in the country that nobody really talks about. Marin works out his stuff there. Todd Glass, I've had him on and he raves about the Comedy Attic. And I've only gotten to go there once. Both my kids went to IU and they got to go there more, but I only went there once. But, it is a serious comedy venue. I mean, it's a comedy venue for comedians, and the audience has to get right, or they don't get to stay.
Yeah,
and that's the way to do it.
Yeah, the Comedy Attic is definitely one of the clubs that has taught the audience on how to behave. Not only how to behave, but also what is comedy.
Yeah,
if a club in a city only books acts that are, been doing the same act for 15 years, these headliners that come in and just, haven't updated anything. They're not pushing the envelope. They're not getting, interesting acts in there. The audience who comes just thinks this is comedy, what it is. So you can lead the audience by the nose a little bit to like, nope, this is comedy. Maria Bamford is comedy.
Right.
Like this is the type of stuff that you buy into. Not that everybody who comes there is happy with all the shows, right? They still get randos who like, oh, we're going to go to the comedy show on a Friday night and they don't do any research. They don't look anything up.
Yeah.
And Hannibal Buress is up there with a DJ and ballet dancers for some reason.
Yeah.
And they're like, what is happening? Jared and Dana have done an amazing job with the club. There are other clubs, like Comedy Club on State has done the same thing, trained those audiences like how to be amazing. So that's the thing, is like, it's always disappointing when a club doesn't do that, when they're just like, nope, this is just how it is.
Yeah.
It's like, it doesn't have to.
Yeah. Yeah, we've got it's a stand-up live here in Huntsville, and they're very similar. You know, the seating arrangement's the same, and it's all, um, it's very organized on how they bring people in, how they seat them, and you're pretty much told how you're expected to act before the show, and you're told in a way that you know that they're going to stand behind that, because every comedy club says don't talk and no table talk and stuff like that, but you know when somebody means it.
Yeah, yeah. To also use the same example again, I don't think this guy still works there because I didn't see him the last couple times I've been there. There used to be a security guy at the comedy club on State who was enormous.
Uh-huh.
And if someone was talking in the audience during a show, he would just go stand behind them. And he's such a large physical person that even if he was behind you, you just felt
Yeah.
like you felt the room was closing in on you.
Yeah.
And so then they stop talking, they look up at him, and he does like the thing.
Yeah.
And then he just stays there
Yeah.
for like a good couple of minutes until they get it. Or like, oh, I'm not doing that again.
Uh-huh.
Like I'm not talking again. So yeah, it is one of those things like a club can train the audience if they do it right for sure. And that's something that Jared has excelled at for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. No doubt. So, what's the best piece of advice you've gotten since you started doing stand-up?
What's the best piece of advice I've gotten? Someone once told me that the plateaus will kill you. And I think that there's some real wisdom in that because when you're first starting off and like, it's exciting, it's super exciting. You're going to open mics, you're figuring out this craft. The challenge of it is the excitement part of it. And, you have a bunch of bad shows when you're young or young in comedy, but the plateaus of when you don't feel like you're really accomplishing anything anymore. Like when you're open mic and you're getting on slowly working your up. Now I'm getting a guest spot in an actual club. Now I'm hosting a club. Like it's that there is a track for most people, unless they're just horrible or horrible people. You have a little bit of a baby roller coaster that you're riding on. Once you start working professionally for a while, you kind of get stuck at a level for a long time, unless something happens to your career, like TikTok blows you up or something like that. But you just I was a working road feature for years, going to the same clubs every year, making the same money every year. And that can be really disheartening,
Yeah.
And then not that it's not great. It's great to do that. And I still feature sometimes on the road. I headline sometimes, I feature sometimes. But when it just doesn't feel like you're making any progress in your career, that plateau it can break a lot of people. You just think like, well, this is it.
Yeah.
I'm done. This is as far as I'm going to go. And so that's why I think something that Stuart Huff said to me and inspired me. I was very lucky to meet Stuart Huff very early on when I started doing comedy. And he was talking about the only thing in comedy that you control is your material. That's it. Like the business part of it is out of your hands. You can try to, run things as much as you want. You can be as independent as you want, not sign with a manager, not sign with a label, put your own stuff out, all that kind of stuff. But there's still market forces. There's still things. There's still clubs that are going to have certain rules or whatever. Even when you're performing the material on stage, it's not entirely in your control. You can have a wild audience. You can have an audience that just isn't feeling it. They're like real dead. The only thing you control is your material. That's the only thing you have total control over. So you should focus on that. If you love writing jokes, perfecting them, and then the important part is then recording them and releasing them so you don't just do them forever. So you start the process over. I do firmly believe that every comedian should be working on their new hour. Now, whether that takes you 8 years, 10 years, whatever, 12 years, whatever, there should be this goal of constructing an hour, getting it down. And then again, the important part is putting it out. Even if you record it yourself and just put it up on Spotify or whatever, yourself, release it for free, however you want to do it. That is huge. And it's also what has kept me in it, because the process of writing new hours and getting them down and releasing them, it's the only sort of success that is guaranteed in a way. As long as I'm still writing and I'm still getting good at this, and like we said at the top of this, kind of getting closer to my truth, then I am successful in that way.
Yeah, working towards something is better than just working.
Yeah, and there's definitely comics. You see people that have been doing the same act forever, and they've now have just turned comedy into a job, literally just a job, and they don't like it. But it's like, it pays their bills. They've got an act that works, and so they go out and do the act. And, I'm not going to fault them. That's how they're paying the bills. Good for them. But like for the rest of us, it's a more of an artistic venture.
Yeah. Yeah. And it would, if you're like me doing that, you would just die inside like you were working at a job that you hated.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
making way less money than if you worked at a job. I mean,
Yeah.
if you just want to work a job to work a job, you can make way better money than, and unless you blow up in comedy. But just like Road Dogg, I know, the things people I'm thinking of are Road Dogg comics.
Yeah.
And it's like, for as much as they don't like what they do on stage anymore, and they don't like the whole idea of traveling and doing it, it's like, just quit, go work at IBM or something. Like,
Yeah.
you'll make so much more money and be just as miserable.
Yeah, no doubt. So we've come to the point in the show that is new, relatively new, and one of my favorite parts is called Is This Anything? And this is where you and I, if you didn't bring anything, that's totally cool. We bring a joke, a premise, something that we're working on that we just want to see if we can get notes on and see if it's anything. And since you're the guest, you get to choose who goes first.
Okay, I'm gonna have you go first because I'm looking at my notes function on my phone where I keep my new jokes and my new ideas to see if there's something on here that I
Okay.
think is
Okay,
ready,
cool.
is ready enough even to share. Yeah. you
So
go first.
mine is so brand new. It's actually coming from a Facebook post I did last night. Here we go. Just FYI, I talk a lot about social media. You know those if you know posts with the hashtag IYK? They're all over social media. And guess what? I don't know any of it. I don't understand what you are posting. Am I supposed to know? Is anyone supposed to know? If you put a picture of your foot and the Teenage Mutant Turtles with IYK, I'm just going to have to assume you've been kidnapped and this is some sort of a message. That's it.
Yeah. Well, if I can break that one down and see, the Foot Clan was the name of the enemies of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I could just, so I mean, I'm not saying don't do the bit. I'm just saying I think I think I solved that meme for you.
Okay. So
I think there's definitely something there because particularly with the acronyms, there's like, you can have a lot of fun with the acronyms. And
Yeah.
I think that we do although it is built into the, if you know, because you're like, what about all of us that don't? Like,
yeah,
I guess we'll just unfriend you. I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, I think there's something there. Yeah.
Yeah. I just, it was just a couple lines when I wrote it on Facebook and then I tried to build on it today. And one of the things that I try to make evident in my act is I don't know anything about pop culture, and I don't have nostalgia. There's no nostalgia with me, and I don't go with anything pop culture wise. Like I will get into like Marvel movies probably when I'm 80. That's when it's going to come.
That's the time to do it.
Yeah.
That's when you should get into them.
Yeah. And so that's something I was hoping to add to that just to show, hey, whatever you're posting there, I don't understand.
Well, I do like that you have this larger structure too of like how ignorant you are to pop culture and then also to like internet culture. This would be internet culture, right? But if you know thing.
Yeah.
So I like that as a framework because it allows you to put several standalone jokes underneath that umbrella
right. Yeah.
of this concept. No, I think that, there's definitely something there. For
cool.
Sure.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. So what you got for me?
Well, this one is, I think, interesting because I'm curious as to how you would pronounce this word that I think it sort of hinges on. But I've been trying to think about other things about my sobriety and particularly about, I've never wanted to glamorize my drinking, right? But there is some stuff back there that can be mined for material, right? Like, and so one of the reasons that I quit drinking is because I kept stealing things. And I don't know if you've ever come to at 4:00 in the morning in a 7-Eleven holding a trumpet that you do not own nor know how to play.
Uh-huh.
But that is a wake up call. That's actually a wake up revelry.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. But it turned out revelry is actually pronounced reveille, but I don't think anybody in America pronounces it that way.
Yeah, I've always pronounced it revelry. Yeah.
Yeah, like the military taps, or whatever. But the opposite of taps, the morning bugle call. Yeah, but that's where I've been hung up on. Is like, oh, there's gonna be somebody who's actually it's reveille,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Yeah, I think there's something there.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and trumpet is the right word there.
Well, it's also a true story. Part I'm leaving out is my roommate at the time, Sally. This was like maybe looking back, I'm like, oh, I should have realized I had a problem, thing. But my roommate Sally was with me, and the actual true story is, all of a sudden I come to and out of this drinking blackout, and I'm in a 7-Eleven, and the guy behind the counter is like, I said, can you play that thing? And I'm like, what? And he's like, can you play that? And he starts pointing, and then I look and realize I'm holding a trumpet. And then Sally goes, I can. And she takes it out of my hand and she starts playing it because she played in band or whatever. And then we stagger back to our house that we lived in. Yeah. So I think there's something there. The thing with this is whether or not to build out and tell the whole next day thing of where I tried it. Because I went to a house party after closing on the bar, my roommate, and there were people jamming. And I just walked out with an instrument.
Yeah.
There was like a jam party happening in the front. And so the next day I can't remember which house it is. I just had a vague recollection of what neighborhood we were in. So I'm wandering around the streets looking like I just gotten run over by a truck because I was so hungover, holding this trumpet, when this like skinny 18-year-old kid like comes busting out of this house and he runs up and he just gives me the biggest hug. And he's like, oh my God, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And it was his trumpet. And I talked to him for a minute. And it turns out that he is a music major at IU who is there on scholarship.
Oh, wow.
And that was such like, I don't know if you've ever gotten so drunk you've almost ruined someone's future.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's
Yeah, I would, I think that whole thing works.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Well, I tried to do the full story once. And when I did the second part about the kid, everybody got real sad. Like they did not laugh at that, like ruin a kid's future.
Yeah.
And so then I was like, oh, maybe I just need to chop it at the joke, at the revelry part.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's something there. All right. Thank you for letting me know there's something there.
You could, I mean, it's no more sad than the last joke on your special. I mean,
yeah. Well, the last joke in my special, that was also what's so infuriating is it builds up all this tension. It's like such a heavy story. And another, at that point, unheard from drunk person in the room, in the back room, yells out during the setup.
Yeah.
So I have to reset after I've already set the mood for a second. I have to deal with them and reset, which is like so crazy to me. Yeah. That story about my dad dying happened before I ever started doing comedy. So I knew that story. And the entire time I did comedy, but it was like 10 years into me doing comedy before I figured out how I could do that on stage and make it funny.
Right.
Without it just being like brutally sad.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You did that well. And the thing about comedy sometimes is we're always looking for the last per minute, but if you can keep people engaged during the part where you're setting up, basically, and you can't think of every joke as set up punch because, it's more set up, tag, and then punch. And I thought, it kept me interested,
Thank you. Yeah.
And
it took a long time to get it that way. I mean, where people were, and, and structurally the way that you do that with a longer setup bit is there's still like these laugh points. There's still the thing about, where I described like, him teaching me how to throw a perfect spiral beer bottle at a cop's head. Right? Like, there's these little laugh moments that keep you in.
Right.
Without it just being sad and then hopefully funny at the end.
Yeah.
Like, it's interesting. Like sometimes jokes like that are longer. There's one on Bloodmouth that it starts off talking about vegan bakery, then it goes into talking about dildos, and then it goes into talking about vibrators. That joke, I could get the vegan bakery part to work. I had the whole thing basically written. And for months, only the vegan bakery part would work. As soon as I switched it into dildos, it didn't work anymore. Then for months, I got the first two parts to work. And then as soon as I started talking about vibrators, it stopped working. And I knew there was something there though. And so I just stayed with it. But that whole joke for the entire thing to work probably took 8 months.
Yeah.
And it was like small changes in how I performed the second and third part of it, how like a little bit of change of wording here and there, but it was infuriating.
Yes.
Like, I know this is funny and I know the logic goes all the way through. And it's just like, that's what keeps us coming back, I guess, though. It's like that.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah.
Never ending trial and error.
Yeah. Yeah. And you really have to be okay with bombing in order to work those out. And I think I've finally gotten there because, even because my 8 years is probably like 3 years for somebody else because it's really just a hobby for me. So I haven't been as obsessed with it, but I haven't been really okay going up and just having people stare at me until really this year. And I'm totally fine with it now. And it's okay. I have to say these words out loud to see how they work.
Yeah, that's the thing. Well, like another saying that gets kicked around is like, don't get addicted to killing because then you'll never try something that is going to take time to figure out, is more challenging. I also always think too, like this is a question we're going to talk about on Dwight and I's pod coming up, but someone asked us like, do you think it's important to always crush and always do kill? I think if someone describes another comic to me as like they always kill, I'm probably not going to be that interested in their act. I might still respect jokes. I might be like, that joke's great. I like it. And I can respect them as a performer. But the people that I'm most interested in don't kill everywhere.
Right.
Like Maria Bamford doesn't kill everywhere. Chris Gethard doesn't kill everywhere. They're doing something that's more interesting, I think. And that's kind of what I would like to do as well. But it's hard though, man.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, I want to get the lasso.
Oh,
yeah.
It's funny. You mentioned Mark Curry a while back, and I've asked him a couple times to do the show because I think he is one of the most underrated comedians ever. So I think he was like, I have to say Bill Cosby. He was like Bill Cosby turned up a couple notches and as real as a comedian can be. You know, a little bit of that, a little bit of Richard Pryor, but, you know, I think he's kind of just sitting back and having fun now because he works so hard. But yeah, he's one of my faves from forever.
I saw Mark when I was in college. So a long time ago, there was a comedy club. There was a Funny Bone in Evansville, Indiana, where I went to school. And I didn't go very often because I couldn't afford tickets.
Yeah.
You know, and I was a poor college kid and I was always playing in my bands on weekends and stuff like that. But I got tickets to go see him. And he literally, when they announced his name, he came out walking through the audience and he's high-fiving people. And the last thing he did before he got on stage is he grabbed this woman's purse off her table and went on stage and he did an hour on things he was in her purse.
Yeah.
And talking to her. He did an hour of improvised comedy, just riffing on things in her purse and talking to her. It was like crowd work with one specific person.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
Yeah.
He's really amazing.
He's definitely a genius.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for doing the show. This is great. The special is out on YouTube and really easy to find. Just put Matt Alano /Martin in, and it's one of the first things that come up, and it's called Tango and Philly. And you did a little bit of tango in there.
We sure did.
And it's really good. Where can folks find you if they want to see it?
You know, my website has all the links to the things, and it's just mattalano-martincomedy.com. But every one of those words has a hyphen in between it. So it's MAT-ALANO.
Okay.
-Martin-comedy.com. Did I say all the things? Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
Also, before we wrap this up, Jason did put in the chat that the movie that you were trying to think of was In the Mouth of Madness.
Yeah, I saw that. I didn't want to put it up so that it would mess up the interview, but we also did Prince of Darkness. So that's actually, we did Prince of Darkness and they brought me back for In the Mouth of Madness because that's actually a trilogy and I can't remember the one that ends that up, but the In the Mouth of Madness was the last one of the trilogy and they're very loosely connected, but they are connected and some really weird movies, but really good. And I can't remember the dude's name in The Mouth of Madness, but he did it very well. Yeah. But I miss Jason. I got to get back to South Bend, see if I can see these guys.
Yeah. Nothing but love for Jason and for anyone else listening. We also love you, but you didn't jump into the chat. So we don't know that you're there.
That's right. Well, thanks so much for doing the show, and your website will be in the show notes, so folks always check out the show notes so you can find out where Matt is, and I believe his performance schedule is up on the website.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Scott. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you.
So, how does it feel when you play Roll Up to Win with Tim Hortons? Buy a hot or cold beverage using the Tim's app and find out. Roll in the app for a chance to win prizes ranging from free coffee and donuts to a Universal Orlando resort vacation or a sweet car. Oh, don't forget the TV. And this year, every roll is a shot at a $1,000 daily giveaway drawing for 2 $500 prizes. Roll up to win and get treated by Tim's. No purchase necessary. Account registration required. 50 U.S. and D.C. 18 plus entered by 4/2/23. See rules at rolluptowin.com for free entry and full details. Void in Florida and where prohibited.